We are just a few weeks away from the release of Phantom Nightmare, which means we are probably just a week away from the announcement of the new world premiere Archetype released within it. And if you haven't heard anything about this Archetype, that isn't surprising, as Konami has been pretty secretive about it, only specifying that it will be a Pyro theme, and suggesting that you buy Maze of Millennia to get your copies of Bonfire. Thanks, Konami. But crippling debt and depression aside, I thought it would be fun to look through the list of existing Pyro monsters and support to see what Pyro has going for it, as well as to see what Pyro is lacking in as a type. And at the end, I'll then speculate what the new Pyro archetype might look like, because I think I have a really good guess. Great, so let's start by going over the Pyro support that exists. Don't worry, this will be short. Pyro has been pretty ignored, and most of the good support that has been specifically Pyro focused has come out in the past year. We have the new Electro Gunner card, which is also fire support. If you summon a fire monster, you can special summon it from your hand, and then send a level 8 Pyro monster from your deck to the graveyard. We also have Royal Firestorm Guards, which is basically a Pot of Avarice on normal summon. Volcanic Emperor can summon itself by banishing Pyros from the graveyard, and then burns for the number of Pyro monsters you have banished. Of course, there's Bonfire being a Rhoda for the type. Fire Ejection is a Foolish Burial for Pyro monsters, which is pretty cool. As well as Volcanic Blaze Accelerator, which can also Foolish level 1 Pyro monster specifically. And then I put Blaze Accelerator on here too, just because it does let you destroy monster by pitching a Pyro, as long as it has 500 attack or less. And then something that hasn't been talked a whole lot about because it's pretty bad is Soul of Fire. This is a gold Sark for Pyro, letting you just banish any Pyro from the deck and inflict half its attack points to your opponent as damage. But your opponent does get a draw. So inherently it's a -2 and no one plays it for good reason. In the extra deck, we have Infernal Flame Banshee. This is a King of Feral Imps type card where you can just detach a material and add any Pyro from deck to hand or send it to graveyard, which is pretty good. And then extra deck, we also have Ancient Flamevel Deity. This requires a Pyro non-tuner and a Fire tuner. And then on summon, it lets you banish cards from your opponent's graveyard up to the number of cards in their hand. So it can be pretty good. And then lastly, I did want to mention Blaze Phoenix, just because it does require Pyro as fusion material, and it does burn for pretty significant damage. But this is all I could find for even just somewhat playable Pyro support. And if we broaden this to look at good Pyro monsters, we see the picture is equally as bleak. There were just very few really good Pyro monsters outside of maybe some particular engines like Snake Eyes. We have some good Pyro monsters. Shout out to Greater Nori Fire. Watch my previous video where I broke this card down and where it can be used. There is a barrier statue, a regular Nori Fire. You can play Laval and Flamvel. They kind of have a cohesive milling / synchro summoning with fire and Pyro monsters, but there aren't any individual cards that are really that fantastic. There is also the Nemesis cards, and Nemesis Flag is arguably the best little Nemesis monster. And then obviously there's Snake Eyes, but Snake Eyes doesn't really support Pyro as a type as much as it supports just level 1 fire. So unless the new archetype is filled with level 1 fires, which I don't think is very likely, the Snake Eyes just probably will have very little synergy with it. And then obviously there's Volcanic. Volcanic is the only true pure Pyro archetype in the game. We don't talk about Helios. And then looking at the extra deck, the new Gaia Prominence card is pretty good. The only problem is you have to use the Synchro monster to summon it, and this sucks, right? Like, Gaia Prominence is a monster negate at the cost of a discard, which is pretty good. And then I did want to point out, because I didn't notice, is that the new Fire King, rank 8, is a Pyro monster. I thought it was a winged beast, but no, it is Pyro, so this does actually work too, or could be used as well. Hazy Flame Bassatrix is pretty good. And then there are plenty of decks that have individual Pyro cards, but the archetypes as a whole just don't have that many Pyro monsters available for them. So the options are pretty limited. So as we can see, Pyro has a lot of really cool tools available for it and a lot of decks. And if I had to kind of group them together in one cohesive strategy, I'd say that Pyro has a lot of decks that are focused on milling and banishment. The Nemesis cards are fabulous with being banished. The Neo Flame have plenty of banishing cards. Volcanic Emperor and Volcanic cards have a lot of cards that banish themselves. The challenge is just getting enough Pyro monsters in the graveyard. I will also argue that Pyros have a lot of normal summons, especially if you're looking at just Volcanic. They already have the Rocket and Trooper available to them that require your normal summon. So I think if this new TCG exclusive archetype is going to try to work with existing Pyro cards, I think it's going to need to have options that don't require normal summon to play. I think what is nice is that Pyro doesn't really have a strong existing extra deck strategy. So whatever the new archetype is, if it does focus on the extra deck, I don't think you'll be locked into synchros or exceeds or fusions or anything. And I think there are enough existing support cards you could benefit from any of those strategies, except for ritual. There's no ritual. Please don't do rituals. And so now we got to try to theorize what this theme will actually center around. And we have one small hint actually in Konami's announcement, which is that the events of an ancient battle play out over and over again. And so from this, I think I found what theme the new archetype will probably have. And I think it's going to be based on this Germanic heroic legend called Hijidibdibdib, or the Battle of Hedones. Right? It's a story of a Viking's daughter who's taken away by her lover. And so her father sends his armies to go take her back. And in the battle, depending on the myth, both the father and the lover are killed. And so the daughter, in her grief, uses magic to revive both the father and the lover and their armies, and then they battle each other again. And this just repeats again and again and again until Ragnarok. And I don't know about you, but this just screams Konami. Zombie Vikings fighting each other over and over just seems metal as hell, and definitely something Konami could try to throw in a world premiere archetype. They love to incorporate Western mythos into this. We got Plunder Patrol from this. We got Cosmo. We got Dante's Inferno. This just seems to be a really nice fit. I think there's a lot they can do with, again, zombie Vikings. But general badassery aside, what would this look like as an actual playstyle? I think there's kind of two options available. I think this deck could either be a mono attribute. And I think if we had to choose an attribute, especially to be released with Phantom Nightmare, I think it would make sense if all these were Dark Pyros. Of the 138 Pyro monsters in the game, 121 of them are fire. So I could see Konami trying to do something different and introducing a non-fire Pyro archetype. And because Phantom Nightmare kind of just has this dark theming anyway, I think it makes sense. I think the other option would be to kind of go in the way of Valiance and have two opposing sides represented by different attributes. In the myth, the father comes to the island in boats and the lover's troops are already positioned. So I could see it being like a water earth Pyro theme would be kind of cute. Or even if they want to have fire water, that could work as well. But if they're going to choose two different attributes, obviously probably the best from a competitive standpoint would be to have a light and dark archetype. I think that would just work really well with existing chaos strategies. And in terms of actual play style outside of the attribute, since this is going to be a theme about an ongoing battle, I think the monsters will most likely have methods of summoning themselves back from the graveyard or maybe banished. And so I'm pretty excited about this. I really hope that this guess is right, but even if it's not this battle and Konami messed up and chose just an inferior story, I think the same general theme will apply. I think there's probably going to be two sides fighting it out in some type of zombie fire-inspired theme. But I guess we won't know if my guess is right or not until we get the new support next week, and I'll be sure to do a reaction to the theme and see how right I was, as well as see how this fits in with the existing Pyro support that I highlighted today. But that's all I have to talk about in this video. Let me know if you think my guess is right. I just think this is a slam dunk for Konami. I don't think there's another story that really pops out as obvious as this one, but who knows? Thanks for watching.